What if I told you the man credited with inventing fingerprint science was wrong? Francis Galton, the father of fingerprints and cousin to Charles Darwin, gave us the foundation of fingerprint forensics, but his system was deeply flawed. Let us take a deep dive into this bizarre story. Sir Francis Galton was an English polymath and the originator of eugenics during the Victorian era. His studies and ideas later became the basis of behavioral genetics. Francis Galton, over the course of his life, has produced over 340 books. He was also the first to apply statistical methods to study human differences and the inheritance of intelligence. He introduced the use of questionnaires and surveys for collecting data on human communities, which he needed for genealogical and biographical works and for his anthropometric studies. He also popularized the phrase nature versus nurture. But his most notable work was discovering fingerprints. To be clear, this wasn't new knowledge. Galton wasn't the first to notice fingerprint uniqueness. However, he turned it into a science. People had been noticing that our fingerprints are unique for thousands of years. They just hadn't formalized a scientific system for identification. In Babylon, around 2000 BCE, merchants pressed their fingerprints into clay tablets to seal contracts, and this acted as a personal signature. Even in ancient China, during the Qin dynasty, fingerprints were used on clay seals and official documents. The Tang dynasty saw records of handprints and fingerprints being used in divorce proceedings and criminal investigations. Chinese law codes hinted that fingerprints could prove identity, centuries before Europe considered it. There were also other studies conducted on the fingerprints. Like in 1788, a German doctor named Johann Christoph Andreas Meyer described in a thesis 9 different fingerprint pattern types: arches, loops, whorls, etc. He basically created the first classification system. In 1858, British colonial administrator in India, William Herschel, started using handprints and later fingerprints on contracts to prevent fraud. He noticed that the prints didn't change with age and were unique. Essentially, Herschel was the first to apply fingerprints systematically for personal identification, though only locally in India. Okay, so how did Galton become the father of fingerprinting? And why was his method flawed? Galton's real obsession was with hereditary and human individuality, which led him into revolutionizing the science of fingerprints. He was influenced by his cousin Charles Darwin, who published The Origin of Species in 1859, and was fascinated with how animals could inherit trait. Galton's book argued that intelligence and talent were inherited. He searched for ways to quantify individuality, because proving uniqueness would strengthen his eugenics theories. Galton wanted a physical marker that was unchanging across a lifetime and could distinguish people from one another. Body measurements were unreliable, so people were looking for a more unique way to distinguish people, especially criminals. Francis Galton started investigating fingerprints, partly influenced by Herschel's earlier work and Fauld's suggestion that fingerprints could solve crimes. Darwin himself even forwarded Fauld's ideas to Galton, nudging him towards this line of study. He gathered thousands of fingerprint samples and used statistical analysis to show that they were unique and permanent. He examined the main fingerprint patterns, which were loops, whorls, and arches. Within those, he studied minutiae, which are tiny ridge details like bifurcations, endings, and islands. Galton wanted to show that no two people could have the same set of fingerprints. He used probability calculations. He estimated how many ridge endings, bifurcations, and minutiae appeared in an average print. Then, he calculated the odds of two people having the exact same arrangement. In conclusion, according to his method, the probability of two fingerprints being identical was 1 in 64 billion. This number gave fingerprints their scientific authority and was cited for decades. To prove that fingerprints didn't change over time, he collected prints from children and adults and from people at different stages of life. He found that the overall patterns, that is, loops, whorls, arches, stay the same from birth to death. The ridges may grow larger as fingers grow, but the relative arrangements of minutiae stay fixed. His method was more reliable than Bertillon's anthropometry, which changed as people aged, lost weight, or were injured, and hence adopted in forensics. In 1892, Francis Galton published Fingerprints, making the case for fingerprints as a scientific method of identification. But even though his method was revolutionary, Francis Galton's fingerprinting system had serious weaknesses. Like, for one, he claimed the odds of two people sharing the same fingerprint were 1 in 64 billion. He treated ridge features as statistically independent when they're not. His math overstated uniqueness. It sounded more absolute than it was. Here is the thing. Fingerprints are biological growth patterns, not random events. Ridge features form during fetal development, influenced by genetics plus local growth stresses. This means features are correlated. Their position, direction, and type depend on the ridges around them. By treating features as independent, Galton overestimated the number of possible combinations. His 1 in 64 billion uniqueness claim assumed far more randomness than it exists in actual fingerprints. In reality, fingerprints are still extremely individual, but the math is more nuanced. Today, experts look at the arrangement of minutiae as a whole pattern. Courts often require a certain number of matching points, example, 8 to 12, plus expert judgment. Uniqueness is treated as empirically observed, not mathematically proved. Poor quality prints, like partial, smudged, or degraded prints, and also human error, prevents his system from being the absolute proof, which sometimes caused wrongful convictions. His system also failed to cater for the thousands of records in police work. Sir Edward Henry, in colonial India, 1897, built on Galton's work to create a more detailed system that police actually used worldwide. He created a numerical code system based on the pattern type in each finger. Each finger was assigned a value depending on whether it had a whorl or not. By adding these up in a specific formula, you got a primary classification number. This meant police could file fingerprints in a card index that was searchable, rather than just keeping random stacks. Each fingerprint was sorted into categories: arch, tented arch, left loop, right loop, and whorl. The system used a fraction-style code. The numerator equals values of even-numbered fingers with whorls. Meanwhile, the denominator equals values of odd-numbered fingers with whorls. Example, a person's set might be coded as 16/17, which narrowed down their file in the fingerprint database. This made it scalable. Police could now manage tens of thousands of records. Instead of comparing one print to every other print, you could narrow down to a small subset. Edward Henry turned fingerprinting from a research curiosity into a working police tool. It was first adopted in India in 1897, then by Scotland Yard in 1901, and soon spread worldwide. Galton partly studied fingerprints hoping they would reveal hereditary or racial patterns. He wanted to see if genius or criminality could be detected biologically. Of course, this was pseudoscience. Fingerprints don't reveal race, intelligence, or morality. But he gave us a theory that fingerprints were permanent and unique. His method, however, was a bit wank, which is okay. Science is always about learning and improving.